Everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I am so excited for this tasting. It's an ambitious tasting. I don't know if you gathered that as you unpacked your box, but we have a lot of great stuff in store, and even more so than the product we have in store, we have a lot of guests on this call. It's not just my voice tonight. So I'm very happy to say we have Tony Hook from Hook's Cheese, all the way from Wisconsin with us tonight, as well as the usual cast of characters, Benji on the ones and twos. We have Matt talking beer and cider, and then Will manning the chat room. So we have a lot of resources for you. We're going to have a fun night. Please let us know how we can make it better. Shoot us a text, use the chat function, or go ahead and ask a question. So we're going to have a good one. One of the things I wanted to make sure to say early on in this one, we have so much we're trying to talk about. So while I appreciate everybody listening to us and making sure you don't eat everything in front of you right away, make sure you don't wait on ceremony too much. Go ahead and try the cheeses. Make sure you try everything individual before you start kind of mixing and matching. And we're going to give guidance tonight about all the different cheeses, about all the different beverages. And then we're going to talk about how we approach pairings, some of the suggested pairings we've come up with. And we're also going to hear Tony talk about the story of Hook. So it's going to be a really fun night. And yeah, Matt, do you mind jumping into the beer and kind of talking about these lineup in case people don't want to open all four? We can do a little overview.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have 4 beverages today. When we're pairing beverages, it is usually like for these pairings, especially sometimes the cheeses are very, very different. In this case, we have all cheddars. So there's going to be a little bit more similarity in the beers than we normally do. But that doesn't mean there's not any differences, but that means there's going to be a little bit more room to play to kind of mix the different beers with the different cheeses. So today we have, we're starting off with a cider from Shacksbury in Vermont. It is called Arlo. And this one is a really cool cider. It's 6%, so we're starting on the low end of the alcohol to begin with. It's a Basque style cider. It's not from Spain, but they do get half the apples from Spain. To kind of mimic that traditional Basque style. And then they have, those ones are aged in chestnut barrels, and then they have Vermont apples as well. And then those are being aged in stainless vats. And then they're mixing those together, letting them sit, and that's their take on a Basque cider. This one I really like with the 2-year cheddar. It brings out like a really weird, interesting, cool grassy flavor. But like I said, mix them all up. We were trying to go for more of a cheddar apple pie, but we weren't finding as much as we wanted to, but it was still really good with all of them. And we were also trying to find a non-IPA option. Zach was talking about IPAs a little bit because they're such a strong flavor. They're one of the only beers that can always stand up to that strong cheddar flavor. There's definitely tons of other beers that can do it, but we found that the ciders worked really well, and we were really excited about that. So we wanted to get that cider into there. And then second, we have the Headlands Black Ipa from North Pier Brewing in Benton Harbor, Michigan, which is in the southwest corner of Michigan. This one is a black IPA, so it's technically still an IPA. You'll have those really strong hoppy flavors that can stand up to the cheddars, but then you're going to have much more that medium bitterness. You're going to have those caramel malts. You're going to have those nice chocolatey notes. So this one I thought it was really great with the 7-year cheddar. But you can also try it with the blue cheese. I think it's really good with the chocolate. It's really fun with, and then try it with all the other cheddars too, obviously. That one's really good. So it's a black IPA. Sometimes they're called Cascadian dark ales. Cascadia is like an area in Oregon, I think. And they think that Rogue Ales started this style, and they're in Portland. So that probably checks out, but nobody's really sure. So most people just call them black IPAs now. So this one has 2 different hops, Sabro and Amarillo. Sabro is more like coconut, mint, cream, stone fruit, that type of stuff. And Amarillo is more like the traditional citrus like lemon, orange, grapefruit. And then those flavors mix really well. It's 6.7%. We wanted to have something that was IPA like in its strength, but then it wasn't just the same exact flavor profile as the other ones. Third up, we have this one, Sparks Joy, from Foundation Brewing in Portland, Maine, and Old Nation Brewing in Williamston, Michigan. It's a collaboration beer from 2 different breweries. Me and Zach were just talking about this. A lot of times breweries will collaborate with each other in a way just to go hang out, but then also to learn new techniques, learn new ideas, share things with the other best brewers in the world. This one's really cool. It also has that same hop I was talking about, Sabro. And this is the one I get a lot more of that like coconut and mint flavors, which is really cool. This one is a New England style IPA, really, really low bitterness. So that's really nice when you're tasting the IPA or with the cheddars. Sometimes cheddars can have a little bit of bitterness already. We didn't want to add any extra of that by using like a West Coast style IPA that's already super bitter. So this one is coming in at 8%, so nice and strong. It's a double IPA. And then we have another beer that's kind of similar, which is the Juice is Loose from Transient Artisan Ales in Bridgman, Michigan. These two are going to be kind of interchangeable. I like the Juice is Loose with the 12-year, and I like the Foundation, this one Sparks Joy, with the 2-year, and I like it with it. None of them are really going to be super awesome with the 20-year cheddar. We're kind of talking to Tony in that, like, it's so good. You shouldn't like dilute it. It's so good, but you should definitely try all the different beverages with the 20-year cheddar, but it's just so, I'm really excited for you guys to try. I had to cut all the cheddar, and it was so nerve-wracking, Tony, because this. So I had to cut all your pieces, and I tried my best to be very respectful, but it was a
Some of it had to go in the mouth.
Yes, stressful morning, but so the Foundation, this one Sparks Joy, and the Transient Juice is Loose. If you wanted to save one of those two would be the one definitely to not open, because they do have some similarities, but one is way more like coconut, lime, pineapple, which is this one Sparks Joy, whereas the Juice is Loose is going to be way more of those like orange, passion fruits, more like traditional citrusy flavors. So if you want one over the other, you can open one versus the other, but I think it's kind of nice to have two different flavor profiles in the same style, and then you can bounce around. That's your brief overview of the beverages, but feel free if you have any questions to send them my way.
Thank you so much, Matt. That was awesome. Yeah, great overview. I hope at this point you guys have tried some things. I saw Will make a great comment about how different they all are, and I think you guys are in for a treat. Anytime you can do a tasting like this vertical concept, it's just such a fascinating way to really learn about a creamery and really taste the cheesemaker's hand. So I think that at this point, it's time to listen to Tony and hear what he has to say. But make sure if you're starting to eat, we're going to start with our 2-year, and Matthew suggested trying it with the Arlo especially. But why don't you go ahead and, Tony, tell us a little bit about you and Hooks.
Sure. Thank you for inviting me to this, and enjoy all of the cheddars and the blue cheese. I started making cheese in 1970 in Barneville, Wisconsin. And in 1976, my wife, Julie, and I formed Hooks Cheese Company. We took over a small cooperative factory in Mineral Point, about 3 miles out of Point. And we had 10 farmers, milk patrons that produce milk for us. We still get our milk from some of the same patrons that we did back 44 years ago. So we're, of course, a few generations down now. One of them's 4 generations. The son's 13 and talking about milking just like Dad and Grandpa did. So we hope to keep the small family farm alive, and we do this by getting quality milk from the farmer and producing quality cheese, which I hope you'll try with the 2-year, 7-year, 12-year, 20-year, and the calf. We ran Buck Grove Cooperative for 11 years and then outgrew that small cheese factory. And we bought the cheese factory in Mineral Point that we're located in now. When we bought that plant, the cold storage was a lot bigger than we figured we would utilize at the time. So we decided we would get into aging cheddars. At that time, in '87, very few places were aging anything maybe to 1 year and 2 years, nothing really beyond that. And we thought we'd kind of dream to go to 5 years. Well, of course, since that time, we've got to 7 to 10 to 12 to 15. And tonight, you're going to try the 20-year. This is the Second time we've released a batch of 20. The first time was in 2015. So in 1994, we started selling at the Dane County Farmers Market in Madison. And one of our niches at that point was our aged cheddars. We decided by 97 we wanted to have something else, so we started producing blue cheese. Our original blue was a Danish style blue, and we started making that. In 2001, we added a Gorgonzola. 2004, we added 2 more blues, a Tilston Point, which is a wash-drying blue, and Blue Paradise, which is a double cream blue. In 2009, we started making Little Boy Blue, which is a sheep milk blue. 2011, a goat milk blue called Barnaville Blue. And then 2013, we added the You Have to Be Kidding, which is a mixture of sheep, cow, and goat milk.
It's also the punniest name in the cheese world, a world that loves puns. For anybody who's been at the shop or spent any time in any cheese shops, cheesemakers and cheesemongers love puns. So that name is amazing.
Came up with the name 2 years before I came up with the cheese. So I had to come up with something to match it.
I love that. I love that. Tony, if you don't mind, I'm going to cut you off for a second to talk about some of the pairings. You know, Matthew alluded to all the different ways these interact. And, you know, we talked about why we have so many IPAs or so many similar volumed flavors. And it's really a volume issue. It's matching this intensity of the cheddar. But so when we talk about pairings at the store, we often think of, you know, there's kind of 2 ways to go at it. It's this idea of a complementary pairing or contrasting pairings, right? And I think that, to me, the 2-year is actually a great way to kind of show both ideas. When I eat it with the, you know, when you try it with the malt of that black IPA, I get the sweetness of the cheese. It comes out. To me, it's more complementary. It pulls out the maltiness, pulls out the sweetness of such a young cheese and the milk sugars.
Right.
But when I drink it with the Arlo, which for those who've had Arlo at home or have Arlo, it's so funky and different. It has a dry kind of like backstop to it. And I think that it contrasts, like the sweetness kind of is contrasted by the puckeriness of the Arlo or the funkiness. Both are good. It really just depends on what you prefer. We find pairings to be a really fun way to try a variety of things and to get different experiences. And I find them to be incredibly personal. You know, what you like is going to play a big part. So if there are people out there who love apple cider, I bet you're going to like the apple cider with everything until you get to the 20-year and you can't taste the apple cider. And if you like those IPAs, you know, you're going to just be in for a treat the whole way across. I'd be curious, please shoot a message into the comments. If anybody's gotten to the second beer, I really think that it you know, it smells like an IPA, but it drinks almost like an English mild or something. It's certainly fruity, but there's still some other notes. Yeah, so Tony, I don't want to cut you off for very long. Why don't we go ahead and start trying the 7-year and keep listening to your story? You were right around when you guys started doing You Have to Be Kidding Me. And one of the questions I thought while you were talking was, how do you guys decide what to make next? Is it like you have the name in your head for a while, or, you know, there's a goat farmer in town you really like and you're like, I got to use some of his stuff? Like, what's that process look like for you guys?
Sure. The way, like I mentioned with the UCAF, it was a name we came up with and we tried to develop a cheese to fit it. But with many of the other ones, it's something like you said with Little Boy Blue. I was talking to Brenda Jensen at Hidden Springs Farm. She milks 800 sheep, and she wanted me to start using a bunch of her sheep milk, and she produces the best quality sheep milk in the state. And we kind of came up with a collaboration where we would make blue with her sheep milk, and each of us sells some under our own label. So ours is Little Boy Blue. And after that fact, about a year later, she would sell some of her excess milk. She's got a creamery on her farm, but she's got very small vats, so she was producing a lot more milk than she could use. And the sheep milk co-op would use her milk. Well, they'd call her on a Monday and say, well, we can't use it this week. Well, she couldn't use it all. So we decided we'd start making more sheep milk cheeses. And then we got into some goat milk cheeses with one of the farmers right around Mineral Point. And so in 2012, 2013, we decided we'd start mixing all three milks and make the triple play extra innings is an age version of that, and the You Have to Be Kidding. So yeah, we just try to come up with ideas for cheeses and try to work with local farms with their milk. So we've always got ideas in our head about something that we want to try. We might make it for a couple times and it works out well, but it doesn't sell that well. It might taste great, but you've got to get it out there, and not everybody is appreciative of everything. So some things go over, some things don't.
Great. It actually kind of reminds me of when we first started. We were reminiscing about this as everybody was getting their cameras right before any of you wonderful people signed on. But I've been selling cheese before this shop for 4 years in California, where people's palates are different than they are in the Midwest. And when we first opened, we were inside the butcher shop at Farm Field Table, and everybody kept tasting these cloth-bound cheddars and being like, no, I want a sharp cheddar. And I was like, yeah, no, this one's a little more aged. You get a lot in the cave. And they're like, yeah, I don't, you're not hearing me. And if you're talking about a 1.5 year cave age cheddar or 1 year cave age cheddar, they don't even register compared to, if everybody's playing along at the same pace. I've only tasted these two so far, and it's like, once you make that jump from 2 to 7, you understand what those people were chiding me at the counter for. They want cheddar that like stands up and makes sure it's there. Yeah.
Cool. Tony, we have a question from Will for you. So how do you decide whether to make a cheddar orange or white? Which color sells better in general, if there is some statistics on that?
Sure. So, it all depends on what's going to sell. And typically about 30% of the cheddar we make white, and about 70% yellow.
Sorry, we're actually not open right now.
The yellow cheddar does sell better in the Midwest and the West. Actually, on the East Coast, most people expect their cheddar to be white. So we do, and even some people in the Midwest consider white to be more natural. Of course, it doesn't have annatto. Annatto is a vegetable coloring, not a dye, but it is not natural to milk. So, you do get people that want a white cheddar, but in our area and in the West, more people like the colored cheddar. So like I say, it's about 70% of what we make is orange and about 30% is white.
Yep. One question that we do have for you is how do you make it the yellow-orange color? A lot of people aren't familiar with the full process.
Sure. So annatto is a vegetable coloring. It's actually extracted from the seed from a bush that grows in South America, mainly in Brazil. The Brazilians decided they like it. The price doubled in the last 2 years, but that's still very inexpensive. But it only takes 3 ounces to color 1,000 pounds of milk. So that's about 100 pounds of cheese. So that's a very minute amount of color to make it as orange as it is. So it is a natural coloring, but it typically, most people would say it does not add any flavor. Some would argue and say that it adds a little bit of sweetness.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. I know it's like kind of choosing between your children, but do you have like a sweet spot in terms of age for your personal taste?
Well, if I was going to pick anything, I'd go with the 20, but fair. Typically I'll have the 10-year in my refrigerator.
Yeah, makes total sense. Zach should be back in a moment for those watching, a little technical difficulties. But a couple other questions for you. In terms of Wisconsin, it's obviously known as an incredible cheese state. Do you have anything that, any particular cheesemakers that you like to work with the most out there, or anyone you kind of take lessons from or have a meeting of the minds with?
We have several very good artisan cheesemakers in our area. Chris Raleigh, Andy from Uplands, Bruce and Ben Workman. We've got a lot of them and we work together doing different things. We might just sit down and discuss different things. Right now, Raleigh's and us and Uplands are doing a victory box. So, just like in many of the other industries, we try to get together and help each other out.
No, totally. That's awesome. I'm going to swing it back to Zach in just one moment, but one more question for you. The 8-year is very popular at mongers, but a lot of people are wondering what the difference between a 7 and an 8-year is outside of just the 1 year of extra aging. Is there any particular differences there?
Other than we typically sell the 7 as yellow and the 8 as white, and the year's difference, you'll get a little bit more calcium lactate crystals in the 8-year as opposed to the 7, typically. A little bit more flavor, but when you get to that age, 1 year isn't a whole lot. You'll notice a minute amount of difference, but not a whole lot of difference.
Awesome. Cool. All right. Well, Zach is back, so let's toss it back to him, and we'll keep going back and forth.
Sorry about that, everybody. So I saw in the comments we wanted to talk a little bit about the history of this idea of aging, and thank you for Tony to explaining it. That ratio of annatto to milk is crazy. But so the idea of aging cheese really starts to take root from what I've seen around the 1600s and that range of time. And it's when you start kind of dissolving the feudal system, and cheesemakers all of a sudden don't have a fixed market. They have to actually go to market and sell their cheese. There's no longer this like lord system and these stately manners. And so as that happens, the market gets smarter and smarter, and they start noticing the fluctuations in milk seasonally, right? If you have a beautiful grass-fed cheese at the height of summer, it has this beautiful butterfat yellow. I know that Tony was talking about Uplands Dairy, so Pleasant Ridge Reserve, and if any of you guys know that, a cheese that is only really made when the cows are on grass, it always has this like beautiful butterfat yellow, and that's what buyers started to gravitate towards. And so it eventually, cheesemakers were like, well, I can erase this and color it and make it so we don't have this perception of the seasonal fluctuations, or even if your cow is eating milk. If you take that and fast forward it to the industrial age, when margarine first became a real product in the US, it came with a little packet of annatto extract, and this way you could color your margarine to look like butter. Now they do it for us, but for a while you could choose how orange you wanted it, which I thought was an interesting piece of it.
It wasn't legal in Wisconsin to sell it colored, so that's why they included the color packet. Because the butter makers didn't want them to think that that was actually butter, so it wasn't legal to sell it anything other than white. So they'd stick the color pack in so you could mix it yourself.
I love that. Wisconsin pride. I was slated to do my first Wisconsin trip right before COVID, and you mentioned all these people in your little corner of Wisconsin, and Sean Hartwig from Zingerman's and we were planning on doing a trip to all of you and doing like boom, boom, boom over 3 days, and then we'll do it next year, it seems like. So next spring we'll get there. Yeah. I got to come pick my own batch.
Quick question for you, Tony, from Will. So the crystals on the inside that are crunchy are usually the tyrosine, and the white crystals that form on the exterior tend to be calcium, lactate. But
actually on the cheddars, they're all calcium lactate.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the tyrosine will be in a Parmesan typically, but as I was explaining earlier, with a cheddar, you get the calcium lactate because you only use a mesophilic bacteria. With like a Parmesan and many other cheeses, you get the tyrosine because you're using a thermophilic bacteria. Thermophilic bacteria can withstand high temperatures like 120, 130, even up to 140. Typically, you don't cook it that hot. But with a mesophile, they can't withstand temperatures above 105 or you start killing them out. So like with a cheddar, you only cook it to about 101. Let's say Parmesan, you might cook it to 118. Or our triple play, we'll cook it to 110. But with a mesophilic bacteria, the highest you want to go is 105 or you start killing it out. So the mesophiles, typically what you'll end up with is just calcium lactate, inside and outside. With the thermophiles, you can end up with the tyrosine.
Cool. So mesophile refers to temperature affinity? Is that?
Yes. I mean, they are different types of bacteria, but it gives you kind of a guidance as to what temperature it can stand.
Perfect. Zach,
beautiful. Awesome. So, we've kind of bounced in and out of this conversation of pairing. And I don't know if anybody was watching in gallery mode, but my eyes just popped out of my head as I tried a pairing together. So I want to highlight it. But before I even highlight it, I want to share with you the language so you understand where I'm coming from. We talk about pairings at Mongers from a -2 to a +3 concept. Sounds confusing. I promise you it won't be. So -2, think about brushing your teeth in the morning and going and having a big glass of orange juice. No good, right? Everything clashes. There's no minty fresh. There's no tropical sweetness. It's just bad. A -1 is when something clashes. I often think of like a fancy dinner party. You're drinking your red wine. You grab something off the buffet table and your red wine tastes metallic all of a sudden. It's having a chemical reaction, -1. 0 is most of our lives. We are not really paying attention to pairings. Plenty of foods don't really interact as intensely as we want them to be. So I think either for mindfulness reasons or just for the product's purposes, a lot of things are zeros. A +1 is when I start having some interaction into the positive, but it doesn't go to both products. So if I'm cooking a red sauce tonight and I pour a bottle of red wine into my red sauce and all of a sudden the sauce is perfect, I didn't do any favors for the wine though. So I would call that a +1. A +2, you start to round out and highlight both things. Maybe the beer softens some of the edges of the cheese, and the cheese, the savory notes kind of make the nuances of the beer come out. That's a +2. A +3 is peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, right? The sum are greater than the parts. All of a sudden, like, this is how you should be eating these. You didn't know it before, but always try these things together. I dare say that when you get up to that 12 year, when you start to like play with the sharp and the transient, the juice is loose, I think you start getting to something that's really, really special. Thank you, Will. I love that. +3 for sure. It's going to be my first tattoo, +3s. So I think that, we've tasted so far 3 cheddars and seen how it develops. And I know I missed a little bit, so if I repeat anything, I'm sorry, guys. But I think it's fascinating to see this progression of flavor. And for those of you who've been to the shop and know the 8-year really well, you can kind of insert that thought in there. But it's really fascinating to see how there's an interplay between like moisture and sweetness versus sharpness. And for any of you guys who've watched me do these tastings before, you'll notice I kind of always sit there and play with my cheese a little bit and make it into putty. And the reason is I can get a lot of sense of the texture and the like fat versus protein, sometimes more than my mouth can. When you're chewing, you're focused on other things. So the textures, I always sit there and knead a piece together to kind of feel the differences. And it's fascinating as you do that to the same cheese, just at these different age points, they have a different play, right? Like someone mentioned what's the difference between the 7 and the 8-year earlier. I know Tony answered it, but I really feel like the 7-year still has this like moist putty-like texture. It's not starting to like fracture off. But when you get to the 8-year, I went to open up an 8-year today and the piece broke off. It was also the perfect size piece. So, but it speaks to this idea that as the cheese gets older and more brittle, it like similar to a Parmesan develops these like fault lines. And I don't get it yet in the 7-year, but in the 8-year, we always get it. And when you jump to this 12-year, like you start to play with this cheese and it just falls apart in your fingers right away because it's aged. Matthew, it looks like you have something to say. What are you thinking?
I was really nervous the 20-year was going to break when I opened it. I was so scared. We all stood around and held our breaths. That's all.
I'm sorry that I make Monger such a high pressure situation. Will can agree with this. I probably need to calm down a little. We do respect the cheese, sometimes above all else. Employees and humanity, and then the cheese. So I hope you guys are all enjoying. What questions do we have about the 3 so far that we've tasted?
Nothing about the 3 necessarily, but Tony, we do have a question for you. Do you ever make fresh cheeses?
We don't make anything like a chev, but we do make cheddar curd and sell it as curd. So, I mean, we sell curd the day of within a couple minutes after salting. So that's about as fresh as you get.
Yes, no doubt about it. There's also a question. Someone said they were very surprised that the older ones aren't even drier and crumblier than they are. Why is that? Because of how they are aged, the composition, or something else?
It's mainly the way they are aged. You know, if you were making a cave-aged, air-cured cheddar, it would dry down and get more flavorful faster if you were curing it at 50 degrees, but it would also be a lot more brittle at a very young age. This, we actually seal the 40-pound blocks in a long hold bag so they retain all their moisture, and we cure them very slowly at 38 to 40 degrees. So the moisture stays in. Even when we cut, like say the 12-year cheddar, typically on a 42 to 43 pound block, we may only have about a pound of whey lost in that 12 years. So most of the moisture stays within that cheese. With like the 20-year, when we cut most of that this time, most of that moisture had helped form calcium lactate on the exterior of the blocks. So some of the blocks had no moisture in the bags at all, just because they had formed that calcium and kind of reabsorbed the moisture.
Awesome. Matt, you have something to add?
I had a question for Tony, actually. I get the question all the time because whenever people ask questions about like the 20-year, and they say, well, I don't know why. They're always like, why don't they make this cheese all the time? And in my head, I'm like, A, that would probably be crazy expensive. B, where would you put all this? And then like it would also devalue it because you're doing it all the time. But where do you store all this? Like, do you just have a room and you just seal it? And like, it's so expensive and it's so rare. Like, do people have to go in and check in on it every day, like security guards? Like, how does this work?
Actually, it gets, you know, like I mentioned earlier, out of each vat, depending on the size of the vat, it could be 50 blocks up to 100, 110 40-pound blocks. We'll have one 40-pound block that's a sample block I'll plug typically twice a year to make sure it's developing like I want. The rest of those blocks are just sitting there curing. They're never flipped. You know, like a Swiss cheese, when you make it, if you're going to try to age it 2 or 3 years, you better be flipping the blocks or the wheels so that the eyes don't migrate to one side or the other. But with the cheddar, you don't have to be doing that. But as to answer the question of where do we store it, we've got a cold storage that'll hold about 500,000 pounds. And we've got another facility we rent that we store about 1 million pounds of cheddar in. So we typically have about 1.3 to 1.5 million pounds of cheddar sitting in storage in any given year.
Will, how does
not
that
very
make you
much
feel
of it
about
makes it
our
to 20.
inventory?
What's that?
I was just asking Will what that makes him feel like about our inventory. So I sometimes get nervous that we have too much product sitting around, but nothing in those. My eyes are just like, what? That's crazy numbers.
It still makes me feel nervous sometimes because we haven't been in business for 46 years, but
right.
That's an insane amount of stuff to carry, especially if you're aging it for 2, 10, 15, 20 years.
Right.
That's really impressive.
So of course we don't age, vats and vats to 20 years, but we do save a few blocks.
Yeah.
We do have a couple questions as well for you, Tony. One person asking, why does my cheese refrigerator go bad but you can have cheese aging for 20 years and the way you do it? And then someone asked, how much of the 20-year cheddar did you age for this cycle?
This cycle we had just over 500 pounds. So it was about 12 40-pound blocks. And I didn't quite understand the first question. Refrigerator?
Yeah, it was more someone joking that,
Okay.
cheese in the fridge won't last so long, but at 20 years you can keep stored forever. So,
a big part of that, if I can jump in, is you would do a lot better if you were aging 40-pound blocks in your fridge. It's the size, it's like if these little pieces of cheese. Yeah. So it's a big part of like how much oxygen, how much surface is getting exposed to oxygen and all these different factors. Tony, as we're all talking about the aging, is your aging facility, I know you said you had one off-premise cold storage. Are you guys working with a, cave? Does it have natural walls, or is it more of just a walk-in? Is it, feel like we use this word
it's natural. It's natural walls.
Cool.
Not as in earth, but the building is built into a big hill. So about 2/3 of the walls are basically underground. It is still a building, but it's affected by the earth. So it doesn't take near as much to cool because of being partially underground.
That's awesome. I find that so often people say cave and they don't even have the underground part. It's just their cheese walk-in. So I appreciate you guys. You guys are like the real deal.
The caves that we mentioned, we've got 4 caves besides the cold storage. 2 of them for the blues, 2 for cave-aged cheeses like Parmesan and triple play. Cave number 1 is actually 16 foot underground. It is by the cold storage and underground, but the other 3 caves, just the one wall is against dirt. The rest are more or less exposed to air coming up from the make room. So they all have compressors to keep refrigeration, and then the blue caves, we keep moisture in there by wetting down the floors just so we can keep the humidity up to 98%. And the temperatures are about 53 on the caves.
Tony,
98%.
We did get a question for you as well. Can you talk about the demand for cheese as it relates to kind of the demise of the milk industry? In a lot of ways that's gone down, but cheese has gone up in terms of demand, et cetera. Is there anything you can talk about in terms of that?
Well, it's just like the stock market. You never know for sure where it's going to land. When March and April hit, cheese prices dropped off the face of the earth just like everything else, and the market got down to $1. And now we're a couple months later, and we're up to the market on the Chicago Merc price is up to $2.54. That's the highest it's ever been. What's sending it there? I don't know. Is somebody playing the market? I don't know. But I think cheese, for the most part, is starting to move again. A lot of cheese that goes to restaurants, of course, is going to be affected for probably the next several months, if not almost a year. But many of the places are converting to selling to retail places because the restaurant business has gone down so much. So, I mean, cheese is moving, but it isn't moving quite as fast as that Chicago Merc price would indicate. So I'm not sure where that's coming from. The big players are playing that, not the little guys like us.
Makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I was wondering, I know you kind of touched on this just now in your first comment, but have you had any direct effects from COVID? Obviously there's like market instability. You guys sell aged cheese, and I know a lot of the like immediate issues have been around people who are making really soft cheeses that don't have, 2 years of kind of wiggle room. How have you guys seen major drops in your number, or have you guys seen that kind of go back up already?
We haven't, because we sell to a lot of small specialty restaurants. So our sales declined probably 50 to 60% with drop in restaurant sales. But we're in the enviable position of being able to age cheeses. And like you say, if you're making something like a Munster that, high moisture Munster that you've got to get rid of in 10 days, or a Chev or something like that, you'd have to be moving it right now. So we luckily make something that we can put away. Not that you'd want to continue to do this forever, because the cash flow would become a problem. But, we've been at this long enough, we're not going to be hurt by it. But if we were a new business just starting out, we might be a little concerned.
Yeah. I just wanted to provide people with a couple statistics that I've been reading in the cheese world. And also, we mentioned the victory boxes earlier, and I don't think we did a good job of explaining it fully, and it all ties together. So some of the numbers I've seen is France is down as low as 60% countrywide in cheese consumption right now in COVID. Industries, just like Tony was saying, it's like 50 to 70% for overall cheese consumption in the US. And blue cheese is really getting hurt. 60 to 70 is everything I've ever seen on blue, nothing under 50. The restaurant industry eats a lot of cheese for us, or moves a lot of cheese for us. And it's shocking. When that dries up, we all feel it. So the Victory Cheese effort has been a really cool project going on. One of the gentlemen who started Pastoral in Chicago, Greg O'Neill, the guys over at Jasper Hills, I think the Bruno brothers threw down. I mean, everybody's kind of jumping to it, and it's supposed to be similar to the Victory Gardens post-World Wars, right? This idea
Correct.
that, we can help each other, we can sustain ourselves. It's not always an answer from, this faraway government idea. We can do something to affect our neighbors, our friends, the cheesemongers and cheesemakers we love. And so they're encouraging people to create victory boxes. You can go to the website, victorycheese.com, and buy a box, but they're also encouraging different outfits that exist to be, falling into that bucket. So we always do our mongers boxes every month. We actually pack them up today to be shipped around the country, or for the ones that are getting picked up in store. And ours is a victory box this week. So we have only domestic cheeses. We hit the weight requirements. I put a little insert to explain the effort, but we're, technically this was a victory box. I don't know if we made the weight actually, but this is all American cheese, and it moves the dial every time that we decide to do a tasting this way, or you choose your meal to be an all American cheese tray. It makes a big difference. So I see a great question about cheese wrapping and how long things will stay. I think that we're in a really good tasting compared to sometimes when I have to answer that question and I'm like, oh, you have a fresh cheese, so eat it in the next 3 days. These cheeses have all survived multiple years, and so they're a little sturdier in your fridge. Tony, please correct me if I misstate this, but I would say all of these cheeses are going to be good for at least a week to 10 days before you really start to lose some of its luster in the fridge. Do you agree with that, Tony?
Oh, yes, definitely.
Yeah.
You should keep that much or longer, depending on how you wrap it and keep it in the fridge and how much air gets at it. But
yes,
it should easily keep that long, maybe even up to a month.
And I always remind people, try to move everything into the lower parts of your fridge. We have a tendency to put stuff on that top shelf, and that's where the fan is. That's where the air motions the most. And so it's going to dry out your cheese.
Right. Yep.
We had a couple other questions. So first, is cheddar made all over the world, number one?
It is pretty much made all over the world. It's a very universal cheese.
Perfect. And then what would you say is the best way that you recommend storing and wrapping these cheeses?
Typically, depending on the size of the block that you get, what we recommend, ours we typically will seal in plastic just so the consumer can see what it looks like. And we'll tell them once they cut into it, take it out of the plastic. If they're planning on keeping it for, let's say, 4 weeks to a month, to 6 weeks or something longer, take it completely out of the plastic, wrap it in something like a freezer paper or a butcher paper, and then put it in something that will keep the moisture in, like a baggie or a Tupperware container. The paper itself allows the cheese to breathe so it doesn't mold, it doesn't keep moisture against itself, and the baggie or the Tupperware container will keep it so the moisture doesn't all wick away and the cheese completely dries out.
And Will and I spend a lot of effort trying to get good paper, so it should be something you can rewrap and reuse. Will can really attest to the amount of effort it takes to import a pallet of paper from Italy with your logo on it. It's not an easy task, but it's micro perforated, so it lets a little bit of any off gas. Yeah, it lets it breathe, but doesn't let so much oxygen come in. So one of the worst experiences. Yeah, so I would rewrap it in your paper if you haven't torn it up to shreds, and that's always our favorites. But everything Tony said for sure. The plastic will work, and the best way to store it, I always joke, is in your belly. So don't buy so much cheese. Eat it. Friends, have we gotten to the 20 year? Has everybody tasted it yet? Are we ready? I mean, I was reflecting as I was writing this that when this cheese was made, I didn't work in the cheese industry. I've worked in this industry for a really long time, and I feel like I know a fair amount about cheese. And back in 2000 when we were making this, I was still a pretty useless college kid. So I think Benji and Will can attest to this. I was probably not the shining example of a human you see before you right now, but there was it's so crazy to think about the journey this cheese has been on. Well, we've all been on this journey of 20 years, and man, does it have a lot of flavor. So everybody, please make sure you've tried this. It's a monumental cheese. I really, I can't say enough about how cool it is. Second time in the company's history. And Tony, are you from, how many companies even go this far? Do you have any idea if there's many other?
Very, very few cheesemakers themselves. I think there are some cheese shops that try to store some cheese and age it out. I'm not sure they actually test it along the way. I think many of them just put some cheese away, hoping it's going to be good in 10, 15, 20 years. If they aren't testing it along the way, they don't know for sure how it's developing. So, I don't know of any other cheesemakers themselves that are aging it this long. Very cool.
I mean, it's really, it's a monument. It's a little time capsule. And I think it's fascinating, in our research before we even got the cheese, we had seen a fair bit of description of like the flavor arc and how things develop. And, it's interesting. I think that if you try the 12 next to the 20, obviously the 20 is more. It's bigger. There's more going on. But I don't think I'd use the word sharp. I think the 12 year is more bright and sharp. What do you think, Tony?
So typically you'll get the most, if you're talking acidity as the sharpness, you'll typically hit the peak at about 5 years. And then it starts kind of smoothing out after that. And by the time you get to 20 year, you almost have more of a milky taste, almost a creamy taste to it again.
We have a couple questions that have come in for you, Tony.
Sure.
First, how do you maintain quality over 20 years? Do you have blocks that have gone bad of these, this 500 pounds? What do you have to discard, essentially?
No. Other than if the package gets, let's say a hole in it or something, and we get some mold, a block starting to mold, we may have to trim and reseal. But like I said, we typically test each batch at least once a year, maybe twice a year. And I'm looking for any flavors that might be just a hair off of what I like. If I don't find anything, I know that's going to age out further. So if it is something that's showing a little bit of an off flavor, it's time to sell that cheese at that point. I might age another batch, but that particular batch is going to be sold at, let's say it's 3 years or 5 years, whatever. Typically the consumer isn't going to notice, but I do, and I know it's time to sell it. But anything that I'm aging this long is going to be standing the test of time.
So what is the limit on how long you could age? Someone asked, could you make a 40-year cheese if you really wanted to?
I haven't, and I'm not sure I'll get to that point. I should stick a few pieces in my fridge and just see how it is while I'm, 87 and 90, right?
Do you
I love
have
it.
any special stock on your own that you've been aging that's even 25 years at this point?
I do have a few pieces that are 25. I don't have anything beyond 25.
Awesome. So how dark is the aging room? Will finds it super interesting how the 20 is distinctly less orange than the 7 or 12. What helps make that coloring?
It's just that basically it does seem to fade over time, you know, the annatto. If you actually take a piece of even like say 1 year orange cheddar and stick it under a light, you know how it pinks. The light eventually and the age eventually affects that color. You won't notice a color difference in the white from 1 year to 20 year, but you typically will with an orange just because that annatto does fade over time.
Very fascinating. Very cool. I saw some cool messages come through over about people's experiences with the 20 year. Matthew was, I don't know if making fun of me is the right term, but he was appreciating my eyes and mouth when I was tasting it earlier. He said I looked very funny as I was searching my brain, but I felt like it fills every taste bud you have with flavor. It is just so big. And it's not this term sharp that we use, which I think many cheesemongers, we don't love that word because it means different things to different people. Even
Right.
as we were talking about it, Tony mentioned, are you talking about the acid? I think from a cheddar maker's perspective, it's the peptide chains, right, Tony? How short the peptide chains are cut in the aging?
Right. As it gets older, the enzymes start breaking those down, and that's why the flavor starts to change, become less acid, let's say, but it's still more of a flavor profile.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so when you come to a counter and you say, "Oh, I really like that sharp cheddar," it takes us 2 or 3 cheeses to figure out, are you talking about a Florey's truckle, which is pretty, it's in that year and a half, but it's really high acid,
Right.
not very high sharp, it's very high acid. And then,
Yep.
or are you talking about the 8 year cheddar with the actual, the hammer behind it from Tony? Or are you looking for something that we only get once in a lifetime, like a 20 year cheddar, in which case you should have had your own stock. So I think it's a really fascinating discussion of like, what is sharp to who?
Right.
Matthew,
Right.
did you have any comments on watching me eat this cheese earlier? I saw you raise your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to tell Tony this, and I wanted to say, first of all, thank you for making this,
Oh,
because
you're welcome.
not only is it just like super good, but like at the cheese shop, we get spoiled all day long. We have to eat the world's best cheeses all day long. So when something comes in like this, like I just gave Zach a piece because I wanted to watch his eyes and his brain move as he ate it, just for my own enjoyment. Like we got like giddy when this came in. Me and Will were texting when you were talking and just like being so excited. Like I eat cheese all day, so I don't really eat it at home very much. I'm usually like pretty okay with eating too much cheese at home, and I cannot stop eating it. So I mostly just wanted to say like thank you for giving us like excitement, and because it's been a really boring couple months, so we just really appreciate it.
Oh, good.
That is awesome.
Something I will go off on. You were talking about the aging process itself. When you make cheese, you typically, almost all cheeses, use some type of a bacterial culture, and that's what makes the cheese to begin with. But the bacteria itself dies out in about 2 months. So it's all the things behind the scenes that start taking over after that. The enzymes and everything that's created affect it in 2 years, 5 years, 7 years, all the way up to 20 years. So it's, we can take some of the credit, but the bacteria and the biology have done most of the job.
I love that.
Questions?
That is spoken like a true cheesemaker right there, by the way. Sorry. As someone who's talked to a handful of cheesemakers, the humbleness and then putting all the work on the flora, that is a textbook cheesemaker right there. I love that.
Totally.
Benji, sorry to cut you off.
No, you're good. We've had a couple questions that have come in. Number one, what makes the sharp taste and why does it fade after that kind of 7-8 year mark that people have noticed? So we'll start with that.
So, well, I guess you want Tony. Never mind.
That's
Please.
all right. I think we've kind of answered that a little bit with the bacteria and then the enzymes, and they change over time and change the peptides and affect the flavor. It does smooth out, get less acidic, but it does become more flavorful. Not more bitey, but more flavorful as it gets older.
Totally. So apart from hooks, someone's asking if you have kind of regular go-to cheesemakers cheese that you just snack on from time to time. What are your go-to cheeses?
Well, I especially like Andy's Pleasant Ridge, and one of my favorites, which nobody would believe, is actually Limburger. Only one cheesemaker in the nation that makes that anymore.
Who's making good Limburger nowadays?
So it's made at Chalet down by Monroe.
Ah, cool.
Yep.
Excellent. And one more question. So does environment make a difference? If you follow the same process for all your cheddars aging on the West Coast, would it change the flavor? What about in Europe?
I think it does, just because we always believe Wisconsin's environment, like Southwest Wisconsin, we're in an area that has been unglaciated for over 1 million years. So the limestone affects the water, the filtering of the water, and the grasses and the feed, and that all affects the flavor of the milk that we get from the cows. So I think where you are, that definitely affects the flavor of the cheese.
Yeah, we talk a lot about terroir in cheese here and where the cow is grazing. And then, Andy, we keep talking about, he does such a great job with this rotational grazing that I've heard him say he can taste in the make room when he's making the cheese, he can taste the curd and the milk and be like, oh, the cows were at this part of the field that day. And so within his little microcosm, he can tell where in the field the cows are grazing.
He knows what they're eating, which flowers are in that particular field.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if you take that same idea from the, flatlands of Wisconsin all the way to Cheddar Gorge in Somerset, the cows are eating different things. They're different cows. And that's kind of the beauty of it. I also think, if anybody loves the history of cheddar, there's a fantastic book, and I don't say that lightly as someone who's read more than one cheese book. Cheddar by Gordon Edgar is actually like a really fun read. You probably have to be somewhat nerdy, but I think it actually is a good book to like anybody. And he really does a great job delving into cheddar, which is like our most beloved cheese here in the States, and kind of the history. And at some point, while we all think of the UK as being like the home of cheddar, the US was making more cheddar by volume that was more well respected at some point in colonialism than the UK. It was only after we screwed up with things like filled cheese and pineapple cheese, which is a very interesting chapter in the book about when we kind of ruined our reputation as a country, and then we went ahead and made American cheese. So we're now coming back thanks to Tony and Andy and all these amazing cheesemakers. But I think you should be proud of American cheese at this point. I think it's, it's fantastic. It's so fun to see everything from a Harbison that's gooey or a goat cheese from Judith Shad to like a 20-year cheddar. There are no holes in our repertoire. This country now has a cheesemaker for every cheese that really is doing amazing things, I believe.
Yep, very definitely.
Oh, I see a question for either of us. What books do you recommend to read? So I was recently told that I'm too old in the cheese game and the cheese primer is no longer applicable. And that hurt my feelings a little bit in an online discussion amongst cheesemongers. But I grew up on the cheese primer. I think that's like people who've been doing this for over 10 years. Like we all read that book because there wasn't any other book. Yeah, I think Gordon Edgar's really great.
I would agree with you on that cheddar book. Yes.
Yeah, fascinating. And he wrote a book before the cheddar book called My Life on the Wedge, his story of just being a cheesemonger. If you are really into the history and the science, it's time to check out Paul Kinstad. I think is well respected as one of the best authors. He's written American Farmstead Cheese, which I believe is a textbook for Vermont for the dairy colleges.
Yes.
Yeah. So a little hard to read from cover to cover, but I've done it. You can do it. You might not understand it all, which is the case for me. And then he wrote a book called Western History and Culture, the story of the cheese and like history of the world or something of that nature. And that's awesome book. Awesome. Tony, do you have any books that you've loved in the cheese world?
That's about it. You know, I haven't read a whole lot more.
Yeah. I have on my counter right now that I haven't gotten to is the War on Raw Milk Cheese, which is a very American perspective on kind of cheese history. So I'm very interested in that one. We'll get there.
We've gotten a couple questions about tasting the blue. People are ready to dig in.
Yeah, are we ready to jump in?
Yeah, and
Tony, how are you doing on time? I know that you have an early morning tomorrow. You still all right to hang out?
I'm still all right. Yep.
Good. So let's go on to blue. Let's go into like the modern era of Hook's history. You know, they didn't start making blues till the 2000s, and then only as they kept playing with different milks did they get to the punniest name of all time. You have to be kidding me. So all three milks, which, you know, I see that more in like Italy and things like that. I think that idea exists for a really long time, but never really in the American culture took uproot. You know, we tend to be monocultures. We tend to make big herds. So this idea that I don't have enough milk to make the cheese, so I'll use a little of this and a little of that, doesn't seem to translate to us. How did you guys, so you had the name, and that's how you guys came up with this cheese.
Right, and we had already been working with Brenda Jensen on sheep milk, and then we started working with the local farm on goat milk and decided to try to develop some mixed milk cheeses. And, you know, one of the questions we'll get from tourists is, well, how much of each milk do you use? And the only thing I will tell people is that goat milk can sometimes be a little bit overpowering, got more flavor than other milks. So we try to stay on the low end with the goat milk. Other than that, I can't give any secrets away.
I love it. You know, we talked earlier, or I used this term volume in cheese. And I think it's fascinating as we like have tasted through this like of the cheese flavors in cheddar. And we've now distinctly departed cheddar, but I don't think we've really turned down the volume. It's still really bold. I get a lot of sweetness. We talked about the acid before. I think this is a bright cheese, this blue. I saw in the comments someone mentioned doing the pairing with the chocolate. So while I don't want to run ahead too much, and I probably will call on Will to talk about the chocolate, I do encourage anybody who's tried the blue on its own to go ahead and undo your chocolate and try that as a pairing. Or for the same reasons that the chocolate and the blue do well, remember what Matthew said, that the North Pier is going to be a fun one, that like the malty back note really helps with this like bright, you know, fruitiness of the blue cheese. It's also, the texture on this blue cheese is really fun. It's, you know, crumbly enough that I feel like I could, you know, get it to crumble into the salad. It's not going to be so creamy, but it still has so much great moisture. Yeah, heck of a good blue. What are you guys all thinking about the blue cheese? Makes me want to try. I love that.
So not to get off subject on that, but on blues, the old timers always used to say, well, you can't make blue and anything else in the same cheese factory because you're going to get everything else moldy. When we started making blue in 1997, we actually add the blue mold to the vat in a liquid form. So you're not getting blue mold spores throughout the plant. You're not getting it on every piece of equipment and having to worry it's going to stick there. So we didn't have to worry about that. The only thing we had to change when we did start making blues, with all of our other cheeses, we make 40-pound blocks, and we would use a nylon cutout cheesecloth that we would wash, sanitize, reuse until they basically wore out. So it might be 5-6 months. Then we'd buy new ones. Well, we started getting some blocks that were tightly sealed, but we'd get a few specks of mold on them. we just determined that it had to be coming from something that was touching those blocks. So the only thing touching was the cheesecloths. So we did have to go to disposable cheesecloths. Not very green, but that's what has to work for us. And after that, we didn't have any issues. The only problem back in the day, let's say the 30s, 1930s and 40s, when they made blue and they had those mold issues, they would actually add the blue to the curd after they drained the whey and mix it as a powder. So of course it would get all over everything. You could try to clean everything as well as you could, but you still didn't get all that powder out. So there were some different factors when they made comments like that. So it's been working for us ever since we started making it. We can still make the blues and the cheddars, the parmesans, whatever, in the same plant and not have an issue.
Perfect. We have a couple of questions about the blue itself. So someone says there's something spicy about the blue. Is there something, what is it? They think it tastes great, but there's some kind of spicy tinge to it?
It comes from the change that the blue mold makes in the milk and in the cheese once it's aging. When you make cheese, typically you're trying to get the milk from, getting scientific again, from about a 6.5 pH. 7 is neutral, water is neutral. 6.5 is typical for milk. And when you make cheese, you're trying to get the pH from 6.5 down to about 5.0. So it becomes more acidic. It makes the cheese kills out all the bad bacteria. With blue, you do the same thing, but the blue mold, as it starts to develop after 3, 4, 5 weeks and then gets to grow more, the blue actually tends to start sweetening it back up, bringing the pH back up. But it also starts giving these flavor notes that you're talking about.
Awesome. Another question for you
Matthew?
from Will here. Or Zach, you want to go first?
No, I just saw that Matthew had a question too, but I saw Will's question. Let's answer it because it's on the blue and it's a good one.
Yep. So the blue mold is introduced in liquid, as you mentioned, but the veining is created by piercing with a non-inoculated needle, is his question.
Correct.
Yep.
So you'll add the blue to the milk when you're making it, just like the starter culture. You'll dip the wheels into forms, and typically we don't brine, we don't have brine tanks, so we hand salt all of the wheels about 3 hours after they've been made, and then we'll leave them in the forms overnight. We'll hand salt again next morning. Then we'll put them on bread trays and put them in one of the 2 caves that are for the blue cheeses, cave 3 or 4, which are higher in moisture. And the next Monday, we'll pull those out of the cave and pierce them with a 60 needle pierce. All that's doing is allowing oxygen into the wheel. So we'll pierce it on one side, flip the wheel, pierce it on the other side. And that's just to allow oxygen to get into the veins or into the pockets of the cheese inside. Once the blue mold can get air and start breathing, it can start growing. So the pierce holes you see in typical blue wheels are not injecting the blue mold. They're just metal probes to poke a hole to allow air in so the blue mold can start growing inside.
Perfect.
It's a flavor highway. Flavor highway.
Totally.
Matthew, you had a question earlier. Do you mind, Benji? What would you want to say?
Yeah, I had a question for Tony about the mold itself and the different bacteria that you use. I know in beer, a lot of different breweries mostly will buy from like yeast labs or different like yeast labs that make bacteria and yeast and some things like, but then there are other breweries that sometimes will culture their own. And I was wondering, what do you guys do and what's more common? Are there labs that do this, or does every cheesemaker have to fend for himself? Is it more like if this guy's really artisanal, he cultures his own and mixes it with lab? Like I've never heard anything about that stuff.
Sure. Almost all cheesemakers buy cultures from a lab because they know that they're getting something that has been basically filtered out. You know the exact strains of bacteria you're getting. When you culture your own, you're just kind of guessing. Now you, of course, are getting more of the terroir of your land if you're getting it from your own cows, but you would have to be making a raw milk cheese in order to develop your own culture and use your own culture. So typically you're getting it from a lab. Like with our blue cheeses, we use a main acidifier, a mesophile, but we use 3 or 4 different adjunct cultures that will, some of them will develop gas so you get more pockets in the cheese so the blue can grow. Some will give it more of a little creamier flavor or more of a bite. The adjuncts don't help acidify. You couldn't just make the cheese with the adjunct, but they do affect the flavor. And the blue mold itself, there are a few different strains. Ours comes in from France.
Is it a Roquefort?
It is a Penicillium roquefort, but that is typically what is used in a blue. But there are a few different strains of that same culture or mold. But one of them that was developed in the U.S. Is actually owned by a French company and developed or made there now too. So I mean, most of those that you get are produced in France and imported into the U.S.
Perfect. And Tony, you mentioned earlier the pH levels, and Will wants to know, when you make cheese, are you checking the pH on every single batch, or do you just know what you're doing?
Typically, after 50 years of making, I can go by hand feel, but we still check. I'm old school, so I use TA or titratable acidity as opposed to pH. I don't like pH meters, but you're doing the same thing. The titratable acidity goes up as the pH goes down. So I'm testing the same thing more or less. I will test it a couple times while we are making each vat. I'm not quite as anal as many makers are where they test it every step of the way. I go more by feel than I do by just looking at the pH or the TA.
Beautiful. You know, I don't usually do this, but I tasted it and it was so remarkably a negative too that I think I want to tell everybody that there's a great pitfall that you can find in your tasting. So if you try Arlo with the blue cheese, because of this idea of like pH and acid and all these different, you know, the Arlo's funky also. It's not just acidic. It's this Basque cider. It's, I don't suggest this unless you want to try something weird. I know that Will is probably already trying it that I said this, because Will, as someone who's grown up together, I know Will likes the weird things. But to me, that's a negative too. And unless we have any questions on cheese, I want to push forward into chocolate. Are we ready for chocolate, friends?
Let's dive into the chocolate. We have a chocolate question, but we'll get to that in a moment.
Cool.
I'm going to say goodbye, if that's okay.
You're going to say goodbye? Of course. Tony, thank you so much for being here. This was like such a treat for me. You know, I get to do these tastings and I really enjoy them, but I don't really get to talk to cheesemakers as much as I, you know, wish I did. And there's no conferences this year and things like that. So just thank you so much for bringing so much value to this tasting. I enjoyed talking with you beforehand and during, and I'm just so appreciative of your time.
Tony, thank you so much. This was
Thank you. Thank you, Tony.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. Bye.
Bye.
Talk to you soon, buddy.
Yep, thanks.
Awesome. Cool. So let's talk chocolate. I'm going to let Will talk a little bit about this producer, but I just really quickly, as I was writing the outline for today, I just wanted to, you know, in these specific moment of time and history, I think that the way we focus on chocolate has, like, you know, a lot to do with the time right now. We like to talk about bean to bar chocolate and this idea of craft chocolate, and it's all about transparency. It's about this idea that terroir creates beautiful chocolate. Where it's grown has a different effect, but it's also about this respect of just human life and humans, right? Chocolate is a really labor-intensive crop, and we've all grown up loving chocolate and talking about Swiss chocolate and German chocolate and Belgian chocolate, and none of those countries grow chocolate. We've erased the growers out of the discussion. And I think that most of the reason for that are not good reasons. There's a lot of child labor issues. There's a lot of slave labor issues when it comes to many of the chocolate growing regions. And so we at Mongers, we try to buy direct trade chocolate. We try to buy at a low end fair trade chocolate. We really want to go with producers that are, doing their due diligence to know where their cocoa is being grown. And that we're celebrating the people who are working so hard, just like we just celebrated Tony with all of his cheese. We don't want to, not talk about the amazing cacao growers. So that's what we've always so we've always focused on chocolate. And at this point, I believe we have the largest selection of this kind of bean to bar chocolate in the state of Michigan. So you can taste many different origins, some over 30 different origins. If you're talking about places like Nicaragua or Venezuela or Vietnam, you can go village by village and taste all these different nuances. And it's just so fascinating. So we found a Wisconsin chocolate maker for this. And Will, do you mind talking a little bit about the other Will in the chocolate world?
No, I mean, I don't know him as well as many of the other makers that we carry. We brought it in specifically for this tasting just to go with the Wisconsin theme. I tried Will Marks's chocolate in the past, so this is WM, and we thought it'd be fun to just do an all Wisconsin box. So when we were setting up the Hooks tasting, I called him back up. We haven't carried his stuff before. I've tasted his samples before. I knew they were good. And so I felt confident, like, well, if we're going to do an all Wisconsin box, I'll call the other Will up and see if he's got some bars to sell us. And he did. And I think that this is it's a perfect chocolate for this tasting. We're kind of playing on Zach's, complementing and contrasting, the smoothness, the classic chocolate flavor of a Ghana. It's something that we often talk about. Ghana and the west coast of Africa is where most of the chocolate that we get in the United States and around the world comes from. And so it's kind of the flavor profile that we're most used to. And so when we're going to be tasting a lineup of, very, very potent cheddars followed by a blue cheese, it seemed appropriate to use a more familiar chocolate and do something that was more contrasting rather than building up that sharpness with one of the chocolates that we would consider very fruity and acidic, like a Madagascar or a Belize or some of the Peruvian chocolates. But that being said, like someone commented earlier that the blue cheese with this chocolate is a great pairing, and I couldn't agree more. In general, cheese and chocolate pairings can be difficult. Not as difficult as chocolate and red wine. If any of you attended that pairing, that can be a really hard task. But the brightness and sweetness of blue cheese tends to lend itself to being paired with chocolate, and so I think this is a great pairing. In chocolate and some of these cheddars in general, I think can work very well. Like that, I wouldn't really pair this with the 20-year-old because it's so good on its own. But at the same time, the 20-year-old, part of what I like about it is that in its aging, it's taking on these chocolatey qualities. It's nutty, it's sharp, but at the same time, it's sweet and savory and chocolatey in a really fantastic way. So, I just am excited to introduce the Mongers crowd to a new chocolate maker of another Will, as Zach said. And as he was mentioning earlier, a lot of this cacao coming out of West Africa has serious issues with its labor practices. And although this is coming from Ghana, it's also still being sourced in a very traceable way. So we know that this is coming from, you know, some smaller cooperatives. It's coming through some very responsible importers. Uncommon Cacao is kind of like the middle importer. You know, a lot of these small chocolate makers don't have the time to go travel to Ghana and then Ecuador and Peru to source beans directly from a farmer. You know, that's a great like fairy tale of what we would love in a perfect world is, you know, someone who's like making chocolate in a tiny factory with one employee, and the employee's got healthcare and they're paid $100,000 a year, and they have time to go to 7 different countries to source beans. You know, that's not the reality. So we do need some responsible middlemen or, you know, intermediaries, to put it in a non-gendered fashion, to do some of this sourcing. And so Uncommon Cacao is the intermediary in this instance. They also source chocolate for a whole host of different bean to bar makers around the United States, including Perennial Chocolate.
That's awesome. Awesome. What do you guys all think? Oh,
go for it, Zach. Yeah. Ask what.
I was just going to ask what people thought about the chocolate. I thought Will brought up like a really great point as like, you know, I keep talking about volume, or often I like point to regions in a fake flavor wheel that's in my head only. But, you know, this has all those low dark notes, and it's like, it's a great foil to all these like brighter acidic cheeses we've been eating tonight. I just really enjoy this chocolate. I was curious what you guys all thought.
Perfect. Well, we wait to get some of that reaction. Will, question for you. What does it mean when it says made from whole cane sugar? Is that something you look for when sourcing chocolate? Is that marketing? What does that mean?
I just believe that means that it's unrefined. You know, it's not a totally refined white sugar. Some of that, most of these, I feel like personally, especially around sugar, a lot of the terminology is marketing, you know. These differences they're distinct, but they're also minute, you know, like if you taste Hawaiian pink salt, if you taste Hawaiian pink salt versus another, you know, French sea salt, right? Are they different? Yes, they're different. Is the chemical composition different? Within a, you know, 100%? No, right? Like sugar tends to be sugar. As long as we're talking about like sucrose versus fructose, like those are different. You know, the sugar in honey is different than the sugar in cane juice or corn syrup. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of this stuff is marketing, and what counts the most is, does it taste good or not? You know, like if this bar were made with refined cane sugar, would it kill you? No. You know, could it taste just as good? Absolutely. So
I also think that in this case, it's, you know, worth remarking, because I totally agree with Will in the marketing and, you know, the various sugars. But what I find remarkable is the lack of ingredients on this one. And that I feel like is, you know, something worth mentioning, right? It has cacao beans, whole cane sugar, and cacao butter, which is also found in the cacao beans. So arguably it has 2 ingredients, right? Like, I don't know if any of you have looked at the back of a Snickers or a Hershey bar lately. Trust me, there are more. And the nuance of the sugar is like the least of our problems. It's like, can I pronounce all these words? Do I know what they are?
That's a great point, Zach. Like, you know, that highlights what I really look for when I'm looking at bars is not like what are the specific ingredients, but how many ingredients are there? You know, is this a bar with chocolate and cardamom? What else does it have in it? If it's got chocolate, sugar, cardamom, and cocoa butter, I know it's going to be pretty good. You know, I don't care what type of sugar is in it as much as, does it have soy lecithin? Does it have 7 other ingredients? Does it, you know, palm oil? That's what's more important to me than the type of sugar itself.
How much arsenic is in this chocolate? All those
Yeah.
things.
Heavy metal.
Heavy metals, yeah. Well, friends, I'm getting ready to wrap up. Let's open it up to Q&A as we kind of get to the end of this beautiful tasting. What questions have we not answered yet from you guys?
One question, do you carry Taza chocolates from Massachusetts?
You know, we have in the beginning, but we have a Michigan producer that hits that super coarse chocolate so well that we've tried to give our support towards Mindo. Sorry, that took me a second. And Mindo's making a very coarse chocolate. I don't know if, Will, you have more to say about them or
No,
that choice.
Nothing against Taza. You know, for those of you who have been in the shop, one thing we try to do is we really try to carry products. For instance, we carry Mindo in lieu of Taza because Mindo's local, and you can find Mindo a lot of places, but we try to carry products that are hard to find. And Taza, they're a great company. I have nothing against them at all, but they're more widely distributed than most of the other companies we carry. And so it's really a function of like, well, we can find a local company that kind of hits that same general niche, and we like to carry things that are a little more unique, or we have a better personal connection to, you know, than Taza.
Totally. What other questions, friends?
So someone asked, give us some perspective of how special was this 20-year aged cheddar that we just had? Do other makers do this sort of thing? What would be your comparison out there?
Yeah, so I've worked in cheese for 12 years at 2 of the country's most respected cheese shops, Zingerman's in Ann Arbor and a place called Buy Right in San Francisco. And I have never seen a cheese that was 20 years old. The most aged cheese I've ever been aware of, Will and I saw a Parmesan that was over 5 years old on a list, and was it 8?
Something like that.
Yeah, and we both like postulated that this was them marketing a mistake. Like, oh, we lost this, and do you want to try this crazy cheese? Like, most likely, it's just not meant to age that long. To Tony's point about these, like, they don't even just put them in normal plastic bags. They put them in a special cryo bag that's meant for long aging. And so I don't know that parm wheel would have been so special. The oldest cheese that I, you know, on a regular basis see that's not in the cheddar world is, you know, 2+ years. So to get a 20-year cheddar, you know, what I really think about, back to that like shock of the inventory numbers, is he had to sit on his money for 20+ years. Like, anybody, regardless of what business you're in, knows that sitting on a resource, sitting on your cash for that long is hard. It's rare. I think that this cheese, it costs money.
It costs money to sit on money that long.
Yeah, and so I think this is rare. I would say that this is as cool as you might think it is. I was super interested in this tasting. I think it's been something we've been looking forward to for a really long time, and you know, I don't think it will happen next year, to say the least.
Other questions. So, you know, I know Tony's gone, but are there any Hook's cheeses of note that people should sample after the selection from your?
Yeah, I really like some of Hook's less sexy cheeses. I've been trying to get Hook's Munster on the counter forever, but they really don't make it in anything but 1-pound blocks. They don't make like a 5-pound block. Now that I have Tony on like speed dial, maybe I can make a special request and solve that. But I think they make a really fabulous Munster that gets like overlooked. There's not a lot of really good Munsters that, you know, it's a cheese that inherently is thought of as a product of industrialization, that kind of Munster. But I think they make a fabulous one. Their Colby Jack has gotten some awards, and you know, it's worth mentioning that their 10-year cheddar is the oldest cheddar to ever ribbon at ACS. ACS doesn't have like a best 15-year cheddar category. They have a best extra aged cheddar, which I believe is anything above 3 years, and nothing in the like double digits has ever medaled before Tony's in 2013 or 14. So, I mean, he makes exceptional cheddar. They're very well respected throughout the industry for that like niche of crazy old cheddars. If you're talking 1 to 5 years, bigger playing field, but above 5 years, it's like Hooks is the guys.
Perfect. Someone asked, what about mongers, Zach? Aren't they a world-renowned monger? That was...
Sounds like my brother or cousin, for sure. One of them. We're working on it. We're going to be featured on a really cool, I did an interview that's going to go live on YouTube on Friday with, it's been mostly cheese industry people, but I was interviewed, and so was people like Betty Coster, who ages our Gouda, who is internationally famous. So somehow I'm on the same lineup. So we're getting there.
Perfect. No more questions. People really enjoyed that chocolate. A lot of people are all about the Munster. Bring in a 20 pounds if you have to. So
I'll work on that 100%. I just wanted to say thank you to everybody. This was a really special tasting for us. And it was so fun to do it with all of you. And even looking through the gallery, I just wanted to shout out, this is a who's of Mongers tastings. We have Glenn Sheets, Anita Levin, we have my brother Josh and cousin Todd, we have, Josh Fiesel here. We have a lot of people that, Lynn, we have people who've been to a lot of these tastings, and, we really appreciate all of your support. One of the things that kind of was the echoing end of last tasting is you guys keep supporting us. We're going to keep doing this. We love what we get to do. We love sharing with you. To Matt's point, it's such an exciting opportunity for us to get reinvigorated and re-excited about our craft. And, we're here, we're loving what we do. And, please keep sending us your ideas. Please keep challenging us with your requests. But, we're really appreciative of the community that helps Mongers exist. And thank you guys all so much. Yeah. We're going to stay on as we kind of disassemble things. So if you guys have any other questions you didn't want to ask in front of everybody, we tend to hang out for a little bit. And if you had friends on this call, feel free to unmute yourself, say hi to your friends, schmooze a little, kibitz. The night is yours. Thank you guys all so much.
If anyone didn't like the 20-euro cheddar, feel free to return it to the store. We won't refund it, but we will eat it.
Well put.